Rule number 1, there are no rules. Rule number 2, no running. Rule number 3, don't talk about Fight Club. Almost screwed up again. Writers are often rebellious sorts, and the last thing we want to hear about are rules. Like, don't stand in front of the camera. There are things that fiction writers commonly do that would not be acceptable in an academic or scientific writing setting. I mean, like things as far as writing, not other behaviors that fiction writers are known to. Never mind. As long as the reader understands what the writer is trying to convey, and breaking a specific rule enhances the writing in some way, then almost anything is fair game. While you can get a lot of mileage out of breaking rules, understanding why those rules exist in the first place is important in order to break them well. Or break them good? So today, let's talk about some common writing rules that us fiction writers can and should break, but also why and how best to break them. Rule number 1 that writers can futz with: conjunctions. Conjunctions are words that join two ideas together. The most common 3 are and, or, and, but. That's and, or, and, but, not and, or, and, but you know what I mean. Common rules around conjunctions that can be broken in fiction include things like starting a sentence with a conjunction. Normally, this is not allowed, but it can be used in fiction for adding emphasis to an idea or giving more separation between the conjoined ideas. If the conjoined idea is a bit of a revelation, or there's a time gap between realizing that this idea is a thing, then this can work quite well. I promised Mama I wouldn't fight anymore on Friday nights, but today is Thursday. By separating that out into 2 sentences, you give a little bit of a delay, you make everything coming after the but be a little bit more dramatic, which can help add a little bit of something to the writing. Remember, always try to make your but as dramatic as possible. Another rule-shattering way to use conjunctions is to not use them at all. This is called an asyndeton, if you want to sound smart and are naming a dragon. I came, I saw, I named a dragon asyndeton. This also works very well in descriptions too, so you can say something like, the morning sky was gray, cloudless, full of dragons named after literary devices. I like this as it has a sort of poetic feel to it, makes the prose feel a little bit more observational, like the narrator's eyes are moving to different things. The flip side of breaking this rule is using too many conjunctions. Normally in an inclusive or exclusive list, you separate the first items with a comma and then add an and or an or for the last item. The shopping list had cat food, cat treats, cat litter, and cat toys on it. If you want this list to sort of feel overwhelming or like you're piling stuff on, you can repeat the conjunction. The shopping list had cat food and cat treats and cat litter and cat toys on it. These boxers eat steak and lobster and salad bar all in the same meal. This is something I especially like to use in dialogue if somebody's kind of thinking about something or they're trying to make a list seem overwhelming or that there's a lot of things on it. Adding in these extra conjunctions can kind of make it seem like the list is almost finished, but then we're adding more things to it. So it can work quite well in the right situation. Next up, rule number 2 that writers can break with usually reckless abandon: paragraph structure. You were probably taught that a paragraph starts with a topic sentence, then moves through the body, which describes the main idea of the paragraph, before ending with a concluding sentence that sort of summarizes the main point. That's fine for academic and scientific writing. In fiction, however, the paragraph has a much looser definition. There are some hard and fast rules around what should be a paragraph and what doesn't need to be a new paragraph, like always starting another character's dialogue as a new paragraph so we know someone else is speaking. But beyond those sort of rules, in fiction, a paragraph can be whatever works. It could be a single sentence, a single word, doesn't matter. Formulating a paragraph in the context of something like a novel or a short story is more about the flow of the prose and how the reader moves through it, more than structuring individual paragraphs as a basis for ideas. Short paragraphs can add emphasis to certain ideas. Moving a single sentence to its own paragraph is a great way to emphasize a specific point. You can make the reader move through a section slower by using longer paragraphs. They'll move through it faster if you use shorter paragraphs with more white space. In general, I would say that tending towards shorter paragraphs is probably better. A page-long wall of description is not fun to read, so breaking stuff up is usually a good idea. There's all kinds of things around like action beats and having characters move around or moving from a physical description to character thoughts that are often best served by intentionally setting things up into different paragraphs. Thinking about how the reader is going to move through a scene is more important for structuring fiction than having specific rules around what should or shouldn't be a paragraph. And the last rule that we're going to talk about that you can break centers around sentence fragments. Sentence fragment is a sentence fragment. Look, a sentence normally has three parts: the subject, the object, and the verb. A sentence is the fundamental unit of stuff happening. The subject is the one doing the stuff, the verb is the stuff that the subject is doing, and the object is the thing or person that the subject is doing the stuff to. While complete sentences are the clearest way to convey actions, and probably the majority of your sentences should be considered complete sentences for this purpose, there are some uses for sentence fragments. Sentence fragments are great for adding emphasis to a particular word or part of a previous sentence, for instance. They put onions on my burger. Onions, Darren, onions. You can for sure overuse sentence fragments, and they should not come at the expense of reader understanding. But when used properly, or I guess when properly used improperly, sentence fragments can work. They're really good for improving rhythm in certain passages or adding emphasis to certain ideas. Speaking of adding emphasis to certain ideas, I'm going to add emphasis to the idea that we should end this video now, because we're at the end of it. So there you have it. I'd love to hear about any other writing rules you like to break in the comments down below. Please adhere to all policies when posting comments. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.